Born with a funny name. Hi, I'm called Luke Yu, but that wasn't always my name. I had it legally changed because my birth name is absolutely terrible. I'm almost dreading telling you what it was, but here it goes. My parents named me Puck Yu, and you can only imagine why I chose to change it as soon as I could. Now, you might be asking yourself why my parents would name me something so awful. To them, it was a great name, but there was nothing cruel about it, or at least that's the way they saw it. My parents weren't born in America, you see. They were immigrants and were really proud of their roots. They wanted their son to be familiar with their traditions and never forget where they came from. To them, giving me an English name was like giving up on their culture and everything they had learned while growing up. Apparently, a really well-known and respected ancestor of my dad had been called Puck. He was a wise man and even appeared in history books in my parents' home country. He was like a war hero or something like that. I read a lot about him, but in my mom and dad's native language, my name doesn't have a nasty meaning. Now in English, it's really a mess. I mean, my first name alone is already a problem, but combined with my surname, it's a recipe for disaster. I've heard every single joke about it, and it's gotten so incredibly old. Plus, I look Asian, but I was born in America, so people just think at first that I don't even realize how bad it sounds. Believe me, I do. I was raised here, and my first language is English. I don't consider myself Chinese. Sure, I like my heritage and love my mom's cooking, but that's not my identity, and I would never move away from America. It's my home, and this is the place I want to be in. So, though my name might sound super normal back in my parents' country, here in America, it was ruining my life. My parents flat out refused to change it, no matter how many times I tried to reason with them. There wasn't a single argument I didn't use. I tried getting mad, crying, begging. I even tried reasoning with them. I wrote a big list with alternative names for them. I researched our family history and suggested different options to choose from after so many of our ancestors. They didn't like a single one, always having something bad to say about them. The only hero in our family was Puck, and they refused to dishonor his memory by changing my name. They explained that I needed to be proud of my heritage and understand that I was an American, so I shouldn't care what people in this country had to say about me. I got so mad when they said that. I was born and raised here, but they simply don't see it that way. And I do care what people my age think when they hear my name. Now, when I was really young, my name wasn't really a big issue. Sure, teachers would snicker when they called me and some adults looked at me in a funny way, but the other kids in my class didn't really understand it sounded just like a bad word. As I grew older, though, you can imagine how big a problem it turned out to be. Kids can be really childish because, well, they are children after all, and they made all sorts of nasty jokes about my name whenever they talked to me. And you can imagine how everyone laughed whenever the teachers called the roll. At first, I sort of found it funny too, but it grew old pretty fast. I was super annoyed by the constant jokes and bullying my name brought me. I wanted desperately to change it, and I spoke to my mom and dad all the time about it. But they were so stubborn and nothing could make them change their minds. Even the teachers would laugh at me. It was so bad. And don't even get me started with what happened whenever I went anywhere where my name had to be called out loud. At the doctor's office, everyone would stare at the nurse in shock that she'd be cursing that way. But then they realized it was simply my name, and I walked into the doctor's office really embarrassed. Or when I went to job interviews, the people who met with me always believed I was making a silly joke. They told me I had to take the interview process seriously, and I meekly explained that it was my real name. There wasn't any joke there. They looked so awkward and couldn't believe this could be true. After I showed my ID, though, they'd always apologize, completely mortified. But you can guess I never got those jobs. After all, who would hire a teenager named Puck Yu? Most of my friends understood this was a really sensitive subject for me, and they made up monikers so that they didn't torture me whenever they called me my name. So I was known by those close to me as Fu or Fi. It was cool, and I liked those nicknames, though my parents were annoyed whenever they heard someone call me that. They scolded me and said that I should be super proud of who I was, not hide behind silly names. I explained that it was my real name that was silly, not the monikers, but they couldn't understand it. Or maybe they just didn't want to understand, too focused on protecting their heritage to care about their only son. Once we traveled to my mom and dad's hometown, and I was super surprised that no one made any jokes when listening to my name. But I did understand enough to know that it was a super normal name, apparently. It was hard to believe, but to them, Puck was simply like Jane or John or something like that. It was a nice relief, to be honest, but since I had no intention of moving there, it wasn't really a solution at all. My parents tried to use this as a way of convincing me to be proud of my name, but it didn't work at all. We just argued all the way back and they called me stubborn. I told them that they were the ones who were acting unreasonably. It was my name, so why couldn't they respect my desire to change it? They replied that as long as I lived under their roof and they paid for my expenses, I had to do as they told me to, and that was final. That was when I decided that the second I turned 18, I'd be moving out and legally changing my name. They were so mad at me when I said that and called me ungrateful, but I didn't care. If they wouldn't try and understand my feelings, I wouldn't care about the way they felt either. I was mortified by my name, and it got worse the older I got. I wanted to get into college, but I knew how bad my application would look. No way I would get admitted, even if I had the best grades in all of my school. Just like no potential employer took me seriously, neither would the admissions officers. They would just think I was making a juvenile joke and throw my application to the trash. In high school, people made fun of me all the time. It was really hard making friends, and I was bullied relentlessly. My parents were called to the principal's office a few times to tell them about all the terrible things other students did to me. Mom and Dad thought this happened because Americans were ignorant and kept on refusing to do what I asked them to. All I wanted was a normal name, and I didn't care about our traditions. I could study our language and our history, but why did I have to suffer from constant mocking in order to be proud of who I was and who my ancestors were? Mom and Dad simply refused to understand, and they kept being stubborn as always. This really strained our relationship. I can't say I ever got along well with them at all. During senior year, some of the kids finally stopped mocking me so much since they were a bit more mature, but it still wasn't easy, I'll tell you as much. I wish I could say that adults didn't judge me about my name, but that's not true at all. Older people can be just as mean and cruel as children and teenagers. The tension between my parents and I only grew as I came close to turning 18. They told me that if I really did change my name when I was old enough to do it, they'd disinherit me. I was so mad that they would threaten me with something like that. I told them that it was my life and I deserved to be able to live it the way I wanted to. They retorted I needed to respect my elders. That was a breaking point because neither of us was going to change our minds. So when I turned 18, I ended up moving away. I went to college and they kept trying to convince me not to go ahead with my plans. I booked an appointment at town hall to have my name legally changed. I don't know how my mom and dad found out about it. Maybe my aunt told them or they stalked me on Facebook or something of the sort. Whatever the case, they arrived just before I talked to the judge and they forbade me from going through with my plan. I told them that I was an adult and I'd do what I felt was best for my future. They treated me as if I was still a child and scolded me, but I refused to listen. I continued with the legal process and by the end of the day, I was Luke Yu. My parents were livid. They called me all kinds of nasty insults and stormed off. Ever since then, they have refused to talk to me again. They don't answer my calls and sent me an email stating that I could be their son again when I finally decided to change my name back. Well, I'm not going to do that. So I guess I no longer have a mom and dad. It hurts a lot, but I have to do what I believe is best for me. I still get along well with my aunt and my cousins, but my parents refuse to come to any family event if they know I'll be there. That's how I ended up going to my younger cousin's wedding, but dad and mom refused to show up. It was so petty, but I have no control over them, so if they want to push me away, it's their choice. Knowing how terrible a bad name can be for a kid, I promised myself that if I ever have children, I will give them a nice and normal name. If they ever want to change it though, I'll completely support their decision. It's been years since I decided to rename myself as Luke, and my parents have still not gotten over it. I haven't spoken to them since that morning in the town hall, no matter how many times I tried calling. Thank you for watching. Do you know anyone who has a terrible first or last name? Let us know in the comments. Please don't forget to subscribe and check out other videos on the channel.
I slammed the door of my dad's car shut and immediately put earbuds in. I didn't want to hear a word from my parents for the next few hours until we arrived at least. I couldn't believe they were forcing me to move from one of the most modern cities to a dusty, crusty old town. I watched the scenery while listening to my calming music, honestly pretending to be living in a music video. We've all done that before, right? Before I continue telling you my crazy story, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button. Also, ring the notification bell so you're the first to know when a new video is out. Soon enough, we entered the town. The welcome sign had the population on it. It was 10,000. My friends had more followers on social media than this town had in people. I rolled my eyes and decided to just scroll on my phone. I didn't want to know anything about that place. A while later, I looked up because the road got bumpy. We were on this cobblestone road surrounded by trees. I looked back, and all I could see were trees. I didn't want to admit it, but the image of the road together with those huge trees was actually beautiful. I looked out the other side of the car and saw a magnificent gate. We drove in, and I was in awe of the house in front of me. It looked like a castle. When the car came to a halt, I ran in. I was so excited to explore it. The furniture was covered in white sheets. There were chandeliers I could tell were once brilliant. I wandered around for a while, obviously amazed at how beautiful that place was, and it felt safe. It felt like home. I had this warm feeling in my chest, even though the house was quite cold. My parents laughed at the look on my face. "Not so angry now, are you?" joked my dad. I just shook my head. We spent the next couple of days fixing up the house, dusting and vacuuming, opening windows and mopping the floors to restore their past shine. I looked at pictures of all the modern buildings I used to go to in the city, but they couldn't compare to the wooden decor of the house and its magnificent Gothic windows with colorful glass. Soon enough, I was standing in front of a school building, watching my dad drive away. I took a deep breath and stepped in. I already had my schedule, and my class wasn't very hard to find. I quickly walked to the back of the class, kind of in the dark. I didn't want to have to go through the whole, tell us your name and 3 fun facts about yourself. Because let's be honest, everyone hates that. My first class that day was history. My teacher was super nice. She said she wanted to begin the lesson by retelling the most famous story of the little village, just for me to be in on the legend. "The legend says that when this town was founded," she began, "the first people who lived here were a family with dark powers. As people began coming here and settling down, this family started casting spells to make their business successful and scam the money out of the poor, hardworking people's pockets. They brought misery upon our town, and when they finally left, they left our town in absolute poverty. It took our strongest people to leave and come back, having earned some money for us to move forward. We still suffer from that family's curse, so much that we do not speak their name," the teacher said. "That's awful," I said when she was done telling her story. I felt for all the people of the town. Even if there was no magic, they were scammed out of their money. "More than awful. I hope they all died out," said a boy near the front of the class. "They were a plague," said a girl next to me. This town honestly only got better and better. It was so interesting. I spent the rest of the day talking to loads of people. They rarely got new kids or new people in town, so I was this shiny new thing on display. They all wanted to know what it was like living in a big city with loads of people. They were all pretty normal, but one guy caught my eye. He didn't pay much attention to me while everyone else did. I made the decision to go up to him and befriend him. He usually sat at the far end of the cafeteria at a small table by himself. I left the table full of people that I was sitting at, grabbed my tray of food, and walked over to him. "Mind if I sit?" I asked him, but he just grunted. I took it as a yes and sat down. "My name is Abby," I said. "What's yours?" "Jay," he muttered. I kept asking him questions, nothing too wordy. I wanted him to feel comfortable. I wasn't expecting much, but after only getting one-word answers, I got tired and just asked him, "Did I do something to you? Why do you look like you hate my guts?" He looked me straight in the eyes, and I got goosebumps. "You had the opportunity to live somewhere that isn't here. Something I'd kill for, but you wasted it by coming to my own personal hell," he said. I had never heard him say so many words. He just picked up his tray and left it where we put dirty trays, leaving the cafeteria afterwards. I sat there alone for a while. When I went home, I had an idea of what I could do to be friends with Jay. I grabbed an empty photo album and a stick of glue and got to work. The next day, I tapped him on the shoulder and gave him the album full of pictures of amazing modern architecture and all the things there are to see in the big city. I left a note on it saying, "Flip through this to escape your own personal hell." When I saw him in the hallway later, I was nervous, but he smiled at me and actually gave me full answers when I talked to him later. Jay and I started hanging out all the time. I started catching feelings, and so did he. I knew he would never make the first move, so I did. I asked him to be my boyfriend, and even though he was flustered at first, he said yes. A few days later, we went to a party at a friend's house. The music was booming, and the house was packed full of people. Jay and I sat in a corner, but we couldn't hear each other talking unless we shouted full volume in each other's ears. So we snuck out through the garden and found a clearing behind some trees. We laid there for hours talking about the future. "Imagine if we never broke up," he said. "Would we have kids?" I asked him. He nodded. "Whose last name would they have?" I asked him next. He thought about it for a second. "Probably mine, right? Isn't that what usually happens?" He replied, to which I shrugged. "I have my mom's last name. Not sure why, though. My dad's is cooler. I'd be Abby Holloway," I said. Jay stayed silent. I looked over at him and saw the look on his face. "Holloway?" he asked me, as if he couldn't believe it. He said something under his breath that I couldn't hear, and then he told me it was late and we should go home. He walked me home for the first time that night. It was also the last time, but I didn't know yet. The closer we got to my house, the more fidgety he got. He had goosebumps, even though the night was warm. I tried to shove him a little and be playful, but every time he looked at me, he looked as if he'd seen a ghost. We finally reached the gate to my house. This is where you live?" he asked me. His voice was shaking. "Yeah, what's wrong?" I asked him, concerned. "And you're a Holloway?" "You're a witch," he spat. I shook my head and tried to reach out and touch him, but he jumped out of my reach. "You're a Holloway, a dirty witch," he shouted at me. He started yelling so many hurtful things at me that I just started to tear up. "Jay, no, I'm not," I shouted back at him. "You're the reason I'm stuck in this town," he shouted finally, and then he ran off. I opened the gate with my rusty key and ran inside, tears streaming down my face. Not even an hour ago we were talking about having kids, and now he just called me a witch and ran off. My mom was in the living room. I told her everything that happened between sobs, and her face turned very pale. "Charles?" she shouted, calling my dad. He came downstairs alarmed. "She told someone," my mom said to my dad. His face fell and he got shivers. "We need to go," he said, trying to keep his voice from trembling. I was so confused. I didn't know what was happening, but my mom took me to my room and told me to pack up everything I could fit in a couple of travel bags. I was still crying over Jay and afraid because of my parents' nervous state. My hands were trembling. They called me from downstairs and I ran with my bags. "Mom, Dad, what's going on?" I cried, and then all I saw was orange and yellow. Orange and yellow light filled the house, streaming in through the windows I so adored. I heard faint voices becoming louder and louder by the second, and the light became brighter too. I could tell it was coming from our gate. My mom was holding onto my shoulder tightly, but I moved away and went far enough up the stairs to see the outside through the window. I saw Jay holding a literal pitchfork and a torch, and the entire town behind him, chanting, "Burn the witches!" I felt like I was in a fantasy book. My mom grabbed me by my clothes and pulled me downstairs. My mom and dad led me down to the freezing basement. My mom pushed a heavy chest aside, while my dad tied a long rope on the handles of our bags. My mom grabbed a flashlight and crawled into the little tunnel behind that heavy chest. It was full of spiders, which my mom was super afraid of, so I knew the people outside must have been very dangerous if she was willing to crawl through spiders. I was still crying and hesitant to go, but then we heard glass breaking upstairs, and my mom pulled me down into the tunnel. My dad gave me the end of the rope and told me to drag it. I was dragging the suitcases and bags while he pushed the chest in front of the tunnel again and started pushing the suitcases to help me out. I was crying and scraping my palms and knees on the rock bottom of the tunnel. My arms were about to give out when we arrived at the end. My mom pushed open a trapdoor covered in dirt, and we climbed out of the tunnel. My dad and I were shaking the dust and dirt off our clothes when we heard my mom gasp. I turned to see what she was looking at and saw the trees I loved so much up in flames. We were very far away, but because the town was surrounded by plains, we had a very clear view of our heaven on earth going up in flames. I could still faintly hear the townspeople chanting their hateful words. My mom and dad hugged me from the sides. I could hear and feel my mom silently crying. "It's all my fault. I shouldn't have said anything," I cried to them. "I'm sorry," I said. "It's not your fault, sweetie," said my dad, wiping the tears off my cheeks. "We should have told you the truth to begin with. We come from a very wealthy family who at one point were believed to have ties to dark magic," he explained. "That's why we never used my last name." So that was why the house felt like home. It had been my family's home for ages, and now it was being burnt to the ground. My parents and I watched for a while and mourned. My dad wiped away my mom's tears, but mine had already dried. We started walking. The next town wasn't too far away, and there we could catch a train somewhere else. While we walked in the dark, my parents thought of all the pain we were feeling, but I didn't. All I could think about was how I was going to avenge my home and get back at those people for burning down my own personal heaven. They chased my family out of where we belonged, and I was going to wait until it was my time to do the same to them.
Ever since I could remember, it was just me and my mom. My dad abandoned us when I was just a baby, and my mom never had any other boyfriends. As you can expect, Mom and I were really close, and I actually liked that there was no one else around. That way, I had my mom all to myself. Though sometimes I would feel jealous of the other kids whenever they had their brothers or sisters to play with. I was on my own, and a lot of the time my mom was busy working, so she couldn't play with me. Sometimes in those moments, I really wished I had a brother or sister, but I guess I should have been careful for what I wished for. But before I go on, make sure you like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any more crazy stories. Things were pretty normal. My mom and I had a great routine going on. Every day I would get up for school and my mom would make me pancakes before she went off to work. Then once I got home from school, we'd watch TV together, and then I'd go off to do homework while Mom made dinner. We'd eat dinner together, sometimes out in the garden, sometimes in the kitchen, or sometimes even while watching TV. And then we'd have a game of cards. I was the undefeated champion until I was 12 years old, though maybe my mom let me win. We'd have a hot chocolate sometimes before going to bed, and if I was lucky, Mom would let me have marshmallows too, and then we'd go to sleep. Life was pretty normal. I didn't want anything to change. I know, change is inevitable. But I didn't want anything to be different. Sure, my mom could meet somebody new and have a boyfriend, and I've never admitted this before, I didn't want her to find somebody new. I loved it when it was just the two of us. And I most certainly didn't want a sibling. That was the last thing I wanted. But well, that's exactly what I got. The first few things that started to change was our routine. Where we would usually have a game of cards, suddenly my mom would say she'd need to go out to buy something quick, and she would be gone for hours. Then sometimes, when she returned home, she wouldn't even have bought anything. I was very suspicious. Was she meeting up with a secret boyfriend? I asked her what she was hiding from me, but she laughed and told me it was nothing. I was still suspicious, though. Then something else happened that turned my world upside down. When I was 15 years old, a new kid moved to our school. Her name was Charlotte, and she was quite a shy kid. We took all the same classes, so I pretty much saw her all the time, but I didn't speak to her that much if I was being honest. She didn't have that many friends, and she always ate lunch on her own. When I told Mom about the new kid at school, she immediately said I needed to be friends with her. But why? I asked. She's so shy, I don't really think she's my kind of friend. She's a new kid, replied Mom. You should give her a chance. Go on, Abigail, just do it. The next day at school, I asked Charlotte if she'd like to come sit with us, and she was really eager. When she got more familiar with us, she wasn't such a shy kid anymore. She started chatting a lot, and usually she was pretty funny. If anything, I actually got a little jealous, because it seemed like my friends liked Charlotte more than me. My friends even said we looked alike. I didn't see it, but they said we had the same eyes and the same hair color too. I was annoyed, and I decided I didn't want to be friends with Charlotte anymore. She might steal my friends. But one day after school, we were walking out of class together when Mom came to pick me up. She spotted me standing next to Charlotte and walked over. "Hi, Abigail," said Mom. Then she looked at Charlotte. "You must be Charlotte." "Yes," said Charlotte, and she smiled. "Charlotte," said Mom, "you should come over for a play date. I'm making spaghetti bologna tonight. Do you want to come over?" "Oh, I would love to," said Charlotte with happiness. I was so shocked. Why had my mom done that? She didn't usually ask people over randomly. Usually she'd consult me first to see if I even wanted to come, and I most certainly did not want Charlotte to come. But I couldn't say that now because it was rude. I sighed and we both followed Mom to the car. When we got home, I was nervous because I didn't know what to do with Charlotte. But Mom took care of that. It was more like a play date between Charlotte and my mom than me. She taught Charlotte how to play the game of cards we always played, and I was annoyed to find that Charlotte was even better than me. Then my mom turned on the TV, and she and Charlotte sat on the couch watching our favorite TV show, whilst I sat moodily in the kitchen. We had dinner, and after that, Mom made hot chocolate. She asked me if I wanted one, and I said no because I was jealous. But Mom didn't seem to notice, and so she and Charlotte enjoyed their hot chocolate with marshmallows while I had nothing. Why did Mom like Charlotte so much? She didn't usually do this with my other friends. What was so special about Charlotte? Finally, the night ended, and Mom offered to drop Charlotte home. At first, Mom said Charlotte could stay over, but I had to put my foot down then. "No, I think it's best if Charlotte goes home," I said. There was an awkward silence after that, but I didn't care. Charlotte wasn't even a real friend. I didn't even like her that much. Mom drove Charlotte home, and she returned a few hours later. "So, what do you think about Charlotte?" she asked. "I don't know," I said. "She's okay, I guess." "Oh, come on, she's great," said Mom. "You should really want to be her friend." I was suspicious then. "Why do you want me to be your friend so bad?" I asked. Mom looked uncomfortable then. "Oh, it's nothing," she said, but I could tell she was lying. After that, Mom had somehow got Charlotte's phone number, and this time she would invite Charlotte over without even asking me. Charlotte practically came over every night, despite me never wanting her to. I was so annoyed. This wasn't fair. My mom couldn't just force me to be friends with Charlotte, but it also seemed like Charlotte wanted to be friends with me. She was always so nice to me and always tried to make conversation, but I was stubbornly silent. She may have wanted to be friends with me, but I didn't want to be friends with her. Then, to my horror, Mom started calling Charlotte honey and darling, as if Charlotte was her own daughter. I was so angry. It was as if Mom was trying to replace me. Every time Charlotte came over, I would lock myself in my room. But that meant I never really got to see Mom, since Charlotte and Mom were practically best buds. Sometimes Mom would ask me to come down to hang out too, but I never listened. For a long time, I believed Mom loved Charlotte more than me. Then, one time, Mom offered to take us all to the zoo for a day out. Charlotte was pretty much living at our house now. I refused to go. I said I was feeling sick, but I wasn't really. I just didn't want to have to spend the day with Charlotte. It's not that I didn't like her. She was actually a pretty nice person, and if my mom hadn't been so forceful, I probably would have been her friend, maybe even best friends. But now that Charlotte was practically stealing my mom, I didn't want anything to do with her. I think Mom could tell I was lying, but she decided to go anyway. That really hurt me. My mom would rather spend the day with my friend than her own daughter. I thought, I just have to accept it. My mom is trying to replace me. While they were out having a lovely time at the zoo, I decided to go watch some TV downstairs. After feeling bored of that for a while, I thought that I would go into my mom's room to get some money to buy an ice cream down at the store. Surely she wouldn't mind. She did ditch me for the zoo. But when I was in my mom's room, I noticed one of the drawers was left open, and I could see a picture inside. I picked it up and smiled because it was a picture of me as a baby with my mom. But then my jaw dropped, because that's when I realized that my mom was holding 2 babies, which meant I was a twin? I couldn't believe this. I was a twin? Where was my other twin? What had happened to them? Then I noticed another piece of paper in the drawer. It was a birth certificate. There were 2 of them. There was mine, with my name clearly on it, then another one, and what I saw really shocked me. It was Charlotte. Charlotte was my twin. How could I have a twin? Why had Charlotte been missing from my life for all this time? Why hadn't my mom told me? All these questions zoomed in my mind, and then I heard a car pull in. My mom and Charlotte were home. I decided I had to confront them then and there. I ran downstairs and shouted, "Charlotte is my twin?" Mom froze. Then she sighed. "Yes, it's true." Charlotte stared at me and she didn't seem all that shocked. "You knew?" I asked Charlotte. She nodded. I couldn't believe this. "Are you trying to replace me?" I yelled at Mom. "What?" she asked in shock. "No, of course not." And then she explained everything to me. Mom wasn't trying to replace me. She was just trying to make us feel comfortable with each other, and she was hoping we'd feel that twin connection. She wanted Charlotte to move in with us permanently, but she knew if she had told me I had a twin suddenly, I would find it hard to adapt. Mom said that she had actually kidnapped Charlotte. Well, more like rescued her from our dad. At birth, we were separated, so Mom took me and Dad took Charlotte. Mom explained that Dad was a terrible person and had given Charlotte a bad life, and Mom had wanted to save Charlotte. That's why Mom had disappeared at random times. She had been visiting Charlotte, who was now living in hiding at a motel. When Mom said this, Charlotte had nodded in agreement, so I guessed it was true. While I was trying to process all this information, another car pulled in the driveway. "Who could that be?" asked Mom in confusion, and then a man showed up. "Dad!" yelled Charlotte. I looked at the man who was my father. His face was red with rage, and he seemed to be drunk. Then, without warning, he leapt forward and tried to attack my mom. I was so shocked. Everything had happened so fast. I was practically frozen with shock. But then Charlotte came to the rescue and pushed my dad off and forced him outside. She locked the door and immediately called the police. I realized that Charlotte may have just saved my mom's life. Our dad was arrested for attacking my mom. I was so scared my mom would go to prison for technically kidnapping Charlotte, even though Charlotte had been willing. But Mom actually ended up winning custody of Charlotte since the judge could see just how bad her father was. And me? I've now had a change of heart. I'm actually so glad to have a twin. I never realized it, but I had missed out on so much by not having a sister. I regret not being able to grow up with Charlotte, but we're now making up on those lost years, and so is Mom. We are a happy family now, and I love it.